Lindsay, thank you so much for joining me on the ledge to talk about the eternal issue of propagation. This is one of these things that we all love to do, but sometimes I think we just end up throwing away half. I don't know about you. Maybe it's just me, but I feel like I do a lot of propagation experiments, and a lot of things don't hit the wall. So I'm hoping that your expertise is going to come in here and help us. Specifically today, we're going to be talking about propagation, the most useful form of propagation, perhaps, which is renovation, when
Yeah.
things have gone south a little bit with our plants and we need help. Not just doing it for the hell of it, but doing it for a very specific reason. This is a topic that's covered in your book, so perhaps we can start off with you telling us, Lindsay, a bit about your book on propagation, who it's aimed at. It's a very beautifully done, well laid out book. There's so much good information in here, but did you have fun writing it?
Oh, yes. I had a lot of fun writing it, but like any author, I also whew, had some nights where I was thinking, "Oh my gosh, I'm never gonna get through this." But overall, I'm brutally honest. So yes, I had some not fun writing it, but I had
Hmm.
mostly total joy writing it because I absolutely love sharing information about houseplant propagation, about how you can make more plants out of the ones that you have. Because while we love to buy plants, and I love buying plants, it's one, very expensive, especially given today's gas prices or the economy,
Hmm.
to keep purchasing more and more plants. And that will lead also into what we're talking about today is saving the plants that we have with rehabilitation. And two, um, propagation is just such a beautiful way to make gifts for people and share the plants that you have and take this hobby that you have and spread it to all the people around you. Because there's nothing more joyful or loving than taking a piece of a beautiful plant that you own and handing it to someone else as a gift so that they can start their own indoor garden. So it was just a lovely experience to be able to write an entire book to help people to be able to share this thing, this gardening love with other people.
Yeah, that's so true. It's really nice when you see somebody that you haven't seen for a while who you've given cuttings to, and they've got a plant that's thriving that came from your plant, and it's just so
Yes.
satisfying. And it's just nice to get. I mean, I have had some failures along the way with cuttings I've been given, but I was just at the weekend at a friend's place, and I was like, "Oh, that plant works there, does it? Oh, that's interesting. Can I take some cuttings and try?" And they're like, "Yeah, go for your life. Take some cuttings." I mean, I've literally just thrown them into a glass of water and no more than that at the moment because I'm like, I don't know how to propagate this, but they'll
Right,
be fine
right.
for a while. But it's so much fun, and in this, as you say, in this day and age, it's really nice to be able to not spend money on plants and still have new plants.
Yeah, there's so many plants that are out there already. I mean, we can just make new ones from the one if people know how to do it, we can just create hundreds and thousands of plants from the plants that are already out there. There's no need to give Home Depot, Lowe's, and these big box stores more of your money. But on the flip side, if
Hmm.
you are shopping at a small plant shop, I do recommend spending money at a small business. Um,
Yes,
I I
agreed.
always when I'm walking into a small business or a small plant shop, I always try to make it a note to spend money on a little plant or a planter, even if I think to myself, I could propagate that from someone else's
Yeah.
plant. You gotta support
I
them.
agree. I agree. It's such hard times for houseplant shops right now. Independent houseplant shops, it is not an easy
Yes.
time in the UK or where you are, I'm sure. And yeah, if I can go in there
No.
and buy a book or a planter or maybe a plant, exactly. Like it's wonderful to support them. But as you say, I need to give an international chain my money? Not
No.
really, not so much.
Nope. Nope.
Although, what's your view on, like, you get the people who are like, "Oh, I found this, I mean, I hope people don't do it to plant shops, small plant shops, but, "Oh, I found this piece of succulent on the ground in the big box store. I've taken it
I
home."
knew you were
I mean,
going there.
what do we say? I mean, I hate it when people do that. In fact, my
Ah,
friend
me
who owns a
too.
plant shop said that he's had people coming in saying, "Oh, yeah, I took a cutting of that plant when you first opened and it's really thriving now." "What, you mean you
Ooh.
stole from me?"
Yes. Prop
Not
lifting,
good.
and it's funny, it's
Yeah.
so controversial. I saw a video on Instagram the other day of a woman who was bragging, it said, "If a doctor's office pothos sees me coming, it better watch out," and it was a video of her taking a little
Yes, yeah.
snipping at the doctor's office, and on one hand, that doctor's office, giant pothos under the fluorescent light is not really is not going to have any damage from her taking a little cutting. It's going to grow right back, and it's not hurting anyone. However, overall, that is wrong because if we all went in there with our scissors and we all took
Mhm.
pieces, then that beautiful office pothos would be no more. So I
Yeah.
am ultimately against prop lifting. I think if you do find a little succulent leaf on the floor, I think it's a matter of judgment, right? If the pot that it came from is right next to it, place it in that pot. If there's no pot next to it and it's alone, like in the refrigerator aisle, then, someone dropped off a plant on the by all means, rescue it. But usually
Mhm.
prop lifting means someone's grabbing a leaf that fell off of a plant and, a
Mhm.
succulent leaf that fell off of a succulent right next to it. In which case you can place it easily back into that succulent pot and it will grow new roots and a new shoot for the
Yes.
person who purchases that plant. So,
Absolutely, I
it's an
totally
iffy
agree.
topic.
I agree. Yeah, it's an interesting one, but I guess it reflects the fact that, this is such uh, plants are so generous, and sometimes we could take
Yes.
advantage of that, but hopefully without taking advantage of the small houseplant shop, independent houseplant shops who
Yes.
have to put so much work into selling plants. It's not something we want to be doing to those people.
Yes,
So
don't do it to the small house plant.
no, no, exactly. I mean, I do love propagating plants, but I sometimes find the renovation propagation that we're gonna be talking about today is the most stressful kind, because it's not just a case of, "Oh, this is nice, I'm gonna take a cutting and it may or may not work." It's like, do or die, this plant needs this to work because something's gone really badly wrong.
Yes.
It's
Yep.
it's crunch time, right? So
Yes.
what are the sort of how does this benefit the plant? I mean, obviously, if the alternative is just chucking the plant away, then it's a good alternative. But what are we looking for from this form of propagation?
Sure, sure. So, and as you mentioned, chucking the plant. So it's funny because when I started off in plant care, I had a really good friend in Chicago here who I kind of went through this plant journey with. And anytime her plant had a pest, she just chucks it. And some of you listening might relate. It didn't matter what the plant was. She hated spider mites and thrips so much that if she saw one, the whole plant went in the compost. It didn't matter if it was big and beautiful and 2 years old. Goodbye. Like the emotional attachment was severed. And I was in awe because I operate very differently. I get emotionally attached to succulent leaves because I can see like it will one day grow into another full plant. So I am on the opposite side of the spectrum, and hence why I'm writing a book or wrote a book like this, because I will do anything to save a plant. And and that's kind of two different two different modes of thinking, right? So your plant is sick or not looking right. The first thing that you need to do is an overall evaluation of the situation. You have to look at your plant and you have to think like, okay, is this something I want to work on? Do I have the time in my life to work on this? Does this plant mean enough to me sentimentally? And do I have enough time in my, non-plant life and energy to devote to this right now? Sometimes it's not worth it. Like sometimes, and that's also a road that if you're the type that you're a nurturer like me and, a bleeding heart, sometimes you really have to look at yourself and say, "Lindsay, like, we've gotta let this one go." We
Mhm.
can't do this right now because it does take some time and energy to go through propagation as rehabilitation. But sometimes the fix is a lot easier than you think it is. So, the first step that you want to do again is an overall evaluation and assess what the issue is. Is it the problem? Is that, and structurally, I'm talking about. So, is it that your plant is long and lanky? Because if your plant is simply long and lanky, like a fiddle leaf fig, for example, this is a very common example. It looks like a very long stick with a couple green fiddles on top. That's not necessarily a life or death situation. It just needs a little propagation to make it looking amazing again. And so that can be fixed by simply chopping the top off. As simple as that. You take a pair of clean cutting shears, you chop that fiddle leaf fig down to a stick that's a few inches, take great care of the bottom, and new sprouts and leaves will grow anew. And there's a great houseplant influencer, Happy Happy Houseplant, that shows on Instagram. Many of you have probably heard of her, Mandy, and she has so many videos about the fiddle leaf fig. And she takes the big chop every year of her fiddle leaf figs and shows beautiful demonstrations of this. So that's an example of an easy form of propagation is rehabilitation. And then what do you do with that top piece? Well, you stick it in damp sphagnum moss or perlite, damp sphagnum moss, fluval stratum, any wet substrate, growing substrate, keep it bright, moist, and it will grow new roots too. And you're going to end up with 2 fiddle leaf figs. So that's just a very simple upfront example of this is not a big deal. This is something that's easy. It's cosmetic. You take a quick chop and it's done. But you have to overall evaluate, is that my situation? Is my plant just long and lanky? Now, if you're looking at your plant and the second thing you want to do, and even if it's long and lanky, you'll want to do this too, you'll want to check for pests. And even if you're not planning on propagating in this moment, I recommend you do a pest checkup every month on your plants. And maybe I'm a little over the top, but if you have the time, once a month, run through, especially in the warmer months when all of the plant pests like to hatch. In the winter, they're more dormant. But in the summer months, spring months, go around, take a magnifying glass, and I say that because a lot of people will say, well, I don't see spider mites. I don't see webbing. Well, that's because our eyes, unless you have super eyes, are not strong enough to see these tiny pests. You really need a 45x magnifying glass. And I say that because I have pretty much close to perfect vision, and I need a 45x magnifying glass with a light to see a spider mite. And if you want to see a flat mite, which are very common now, they are red and even smaller than spider mites, you really need a 45x magnifying glass or a jeweler's loop or a little handheld microscope and go around and take a look at some of your leaves, especially if you have alocasias like me, which are spider mite magnets.
Mhm. Mhm.
Take a look around, see if you have any leaves that have suspicious yellow edges. Some of your houseplants that are struggling might have yellow leaves because it's just called senescence, meaning they are fading over time due to nature. Just like in the autumn, leaves are yellow. That's leaf senescence. That's normal. But if your leaves are turning yellow, especially the newer leaves, you might have some pest issues. So look around, evaluate with a magnifying glass or something that helps you see insects up close. So you want to rule out pests before we propagate. If you do find pests, that is a different podcast episode, which
Yeah, that's
how
a
to
whole 'nother topic. Yeah.
yes. If you do find pests, there's tons of resources out there of how to treat the specific pests that you do find. So that is kind of how I go about things. I evaluate the situation. I see what it is. Is it long and lanky? Yes or no? And does it have pests? Now, if I see that a plant does not have a pest issue of any kind, or say it does have pests, I'll treat the pests, okay? And I'll get rid of the pests. But maybe it's still struggling. So at this point, I'm like, why is this plant looking meh? Like, I want my plants to look beautiful. Sometimes a plant just looks like it's on its way out. So take a look at the leaves overall. Are they drooping? Are they withered? The top half of your plant, we haven't pulled it out of the soil yet, or the substrate, lechuza, leca, whatever it's planted in. The leaves and the stems have clues to tell you. So if your leaves, and you've ruled out pests already at this point, if your leaves, again, are yellow on the bottom, it's probably just due to nature, leaf senescence. It also could be, if you have an excessive amount of yellow leaves on the bottom, it could be your plant just needs to be up potted. It might just be struggling in a small pot. However, if the leaves look spotted overall and like a Salvador Dali painting, and there's multicolor. This is not a croton. You have like multi weird colors going on. You might be dealing with some kind of fungal or bacteria infection or a virus. There are some viruses. This is not that common. So a lot
Mm.
of people I'm on a lot of plant message boards because that's what I do pretty much in my spare time because I'm a total dork. So when I'm not writing about plants, I'm hanging out on the plant message boards. So I know I'm on, and not message boards like 1980 message boards, but like, well, those two, I go back in archives, but a lot of Facebook groups, people are
Mm.
asking all the time, is this a virus? Is this a virus? Is this a bacteria infection? And the answer is usually no,
Mm.
because viruses and bacteria infections have to be verified by a laboratory. So if you have a plant and you want to verify it 100%, you'd have to send that tissue into a lab to verify it. And bacteria and fungal infections typically only happen in very humid greenhouse environments, which our houseplants are not growing in
Mm.
typically. So to get a fungal and bacteria infection in your dry home is not that common. It can happen, but it's not that common. And a virus can definitely happen. There's like the cucumber mosaic virus, and mosaic virus, that DMV that spreads or along aeroids. However, it's not as often as you think. So before you jump into the conclusion that your plant has a virus or bacteria, it might be a good idea to post on a Facebook group, ask other experts for their opinion. But even before you do that, we're going to check something else. And that's the root system. Because more often than not, these funky looking leaves, if you've ruled out pests, because pests can cause funky looking leaves, you have no pests, you have funky looking leaves, or they're withered, more often than not, it's the roots. It's the roots, and Jane's shaking her head. She's like, yep, yep. And it's,
Yeah,
that's,
so true.
it
It's so
is.
true. I think people get so obsessed with the top growth and what's going on there, and they don't even think of looking at the roots. And actually, as you say, so many times it's what's going on down there that's causing the problem, be it that it's completely root bound and unable to get any, the water's just running through or the roots are rotting. I mean, there's just so much to learn from a root system that we need to take on board. And yeah, that's always the first thing that I do is looking at the roots, but I know a lot of people don't wanna make the mess. I mean, it does
Right.
get difficult when you've got a really big plant. That's the only time I really hesitate. It's like, "Oh, no, I'm gonna give myself a hernia trying to get this out of the pot."
Yes, yes. Jane's like, "I go right for the jugular. I'm just ripping that plant out, going." But it's true because the roots are, and the more experienced of I find that of a horticulturist or a houseplant owner you are, the more often you come to the conclusion that it's typically going to be the roots.
I'm
But
in the
when
houseplant shop taking the plant out of the pot. I'm that person. Like, I'm just gonna check the roots on this, but I'm not
Yep,
spending money on something if I haven't seen the roots.
right. It's like
Sorry, but that's just the situation.
it right, sorry, but not sorry. Let me see
Yeah.
what this plant is working with. I mean, it's like that the roots tell the story. Anytime someone posts a picture of their struggling plant on a Facebook page, I say, look at the roots. The roots are going to tell you the story. And, I think it's really important to go through those first steps because if a plant has a pest issue, um, that you have to rule that out first. But ultimately, most of the issues besides pests is going to come down to the fact, and then that once in a while fungal, bacterial, virus issue, once in a blue moon, that's going to be a very small percent. Most of the time, it's because it's overwatered or underwatered, or the environmental conditions. It was either likely too cold. If it was too cold for some of these really warm tropical aeroids, the root system can collapse. But usually you did not water it
Mhm.
soon enough, or you watered it too much, or the potting media is too dense. So you pick up the plant out of the pot and you look up the roots. And if you are new to houseplants, this can be a very scary thing to do, to take your plant out of the pot. I find that a lot of people that I coach through this, that is the one point in the process where they stop. They're like, no, like, wait, everything was fine. And for some people, it's a fear of not wanting to touch dirt, actually. Um,
Yes. Yes, this is a
I'm
big issue for
surprised.
people. This is a big issue. I've
Yeah.
definitely found that. I think we're very much in the era of worrying about dirt and being very paranoid about it. And some people do just can't bear to touch it with their hands, which is, or sometimes it's a textural thing. It's like they don't like the
Yes.
feel. So which is fine. You can wear gloves. It's not a problem, but you've got to get in there and have a look. I mean,
Right.
compared to outdoor gardening, I think there's less horrible things that I find in houseplant
Yeah.
pots than I do outside. Like, outside, it can get really, horrible. Like, there's, like, "Oh, I've just pulled this hosta out of the pot and there's a massive slug just sitting there," or
Yeah.
I was potting up some containers on the patio yesterday, and I just bought them, and in the bottom of one of the root balls was a plastic bag. I'm just like, "What the hell's
Ugh.
that doing there?"
Right, right. You don't know.
But you
You
don't get
pierced a
those problems.
yeah.
Yeah, I don't think you get so much of that in the houseplant world. I think the thing that I fear seeing most is, as I've said before on the show many times, is root mealybugs. If I see root mealybugs, I immediately just have a massive breakdown. Just like, I'm gonna have a nervous breakdown if I see root mealybugs. I am so traumatized.
That's when you chuck
Um,
it. That's when you chuck the
yeah, that's right. I mean, that's when I'm normally taking cuttings and getting rid of the root ball
Yeah.
because it's no fun. But yeah, most of the time there's not anything too hideous to see in
No,
houseplant roots. Most of the
no.
time it's fairly straightforward. Just
It's
maybe
fair.
some mushy bits where it's rotted is the worst case scenario, I
Right.
guess.
Right. And that's
Yeah.
exactly what I was going to say next is that, so you're picking up, the plant. And in all of this, you have to think that you're the plant doctor, right? So we're playing plant doctor here. Maybe in this case, we're playing like plant gynecologist because we're looking under the skirt.
Oh my
And now
god. Yeah.
we're seeing what's under and what's below. And this is the point where we have to get really diagnostic and get in there. So wear gloves because you're getting in there and we're going to pick through the roots. It's not enough to just like look at the outside of your root ball hanging in the air. What you want to really spread after my gynecology analogy, I'm going
Wishing
to
you
stop.
hadn't said that, but anyway.
I'm the queen. I'm the queen of thinking things and then saying things and then wishing I didn't say it. And now I'm using like hand analogies. You're going to
I hear
spread
you.
open the roots. Okay, I'm going to stop. Okay, rewind. Okay, spread open the roots and we're going to look for any type of root that is not pink or white. And even mildly like vanilla colored is okay, because on different plants have pink roots, different plants have white roots. You want pink, white, or firm. And those are the roots that are still healthy. If the root is soft, mushy, black, of course. We don't want any black roots. We don't want any brown roots, any slimy roots. Um, and the worst are the roots and the most deceiving roots. And these are the roots that really got me when I first started with houseplants. I thought, okay, I could do this. I am looking for roots that are brown or black. And I would take a Hoya out of its pot and I'd look at the root system and say, like a struggling Hoya. And I'd say, oh, all these roots are white. Everything's fine. But Hoyas are tricky because Hoya's roots will dry out a lot. And that's their problem. More often than turning to slimy mush, they will desiccate and dry out. And they're still white. And so it's not enough that you are only looking for black and brown roots that are slimy. You also have to look for firm roots that when you take your finger and slide it along the outer sheath of the root gently, that the whole outer sheath or outer coating of the root doesn't just slide off. It shouldn't. A root should be one firm, like tube, if you will, tubular system. So if it slides right off, it means it's all dried up. And so even if it's a white Hoya root and fragments come off of it, it's desiccated. So that's a bad root too. And so a lot of times if your Hoyas go down, it's because it dried out too much, which happens a lot with Hoyas because you can go forever without watering Hoyas, not forever, but like 2 weeks, 3 weeks. And sometimes life gets in the way and that turns into 4 weeks and your Hoya still looks great because these leaves retain water. And then one day you look and that Hoya is not looking great anymore. And so you water it again and the leaves are still wrinkled. And you say, what's going on? The leaves aren't plumping up. Again, check for pests, especially flat mites. Ruling out pests, you lift the plant up and you might find these dried, desiccated roots that are still white, but when you run your finger along the edges, the sheath might come off. So it's all about the way that the roots feel and the way that the roots look. And if you really want to get all your senses involved, the way they smell. Because rotting
Definitely.
roots, oh, not the
Yeah, it's not
Hoyas,
good.
because those are dry, but when you get to like an alocasia, for example, oh, there's
Yeah.
nothing smells worse than a rotting alocasia, but the roots will be brown and slimy. Anyway,
Well,
that will tell
can we
you.
conjure up a phrase to describe the alocasia rotting root smell? What is it? Is it like when you go into the bin and there's like bin juice in the bottom? Is it that kind of vibe?
It is that vibe,
I
yes.
don't know if you say
Ye
bin juice in America, but that's what we call it here. You know, like when you get that residue at the
Bin
bottom of your
juice.
trash can, we call it
I've
bin
never
juice.
We don't have a term for that in the US, but I think we should start making it a thing. We should
Yeah,
start
it's a
spread
real thing. It's a
Next time
real
something
thing.
smells
Yeah.
in my house, I'm just gonna surprise my family and say, "This smells like bin juice." I'm like, "What?" My kids are gonna
Yeah,
ask for
it's a good
juice.
one.
Bin juice.
Not that juice.
Yeah, no.
Definitely not.
But that's such I love when there's terms in other languages because then I get jealous. Like, why don't we have that in English? Because that makes so much sense. It kind of smells like your compost. I don't know if you compost on your counter because we have a
Mhm.
little compost bin. And like,
Mhm.
if it's been there for a while and you open it up and it's like all your vegetables from the past few days, it's like
Yeah,
bin
got
juice.
you.
So yes, don't sniff the bin juice. Don't inhale the bin juice. Just take off all the roots. And so that's the next step. So you're going to want to in the rehab process, if the roots are bad, which they probably will be if your plant is really struggling and it's not because of
Mhm.
pests, it's probably the roots. People say, okay, well, should I just pot it up in a new pot? No, 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 you have to do surgery. So now you've gone from plant gynecologist to plant gynecological surgeon, that
Yeah.
you have graduated, to a new level of med school, and you're gonna get your scalpel, this is gonna make people dizzy. Okay, we're not talking about real surgery here, but this is plant surgery. So, you need a scalpel of some sort, or it can be any kind of cutting instrument. I like to use my sharp, smooth knives for my kitchen. Don't tell my husband,
Mm,
because if he knows I use this for,
mhm.
like, rotting plants, he will never let me. I don't cook, he cooks, but then I use all his nice cooking, because he has, like, really nice knives, and they work much better than my cheap propagation stuff that I buy on Amazon. So I secretly use my husband's really nice knives and, spray rubbing alcohol on them, but you can use any kind of, razor blade or even propagation scissors, fine. Sterilize it by spraying some 70% rubbing alcohol, 90% rubbing alcohol on them, wipe them off, and then you are going to remove every single rotting root that you see at the base. You want at the base of the root. You want nothing left of the root system. Now, one caveat, so or one distinction I'd like to make, because it's hard to explain this process for all plants because plants are different. If we're talking about something like, say, an alocasia or an anthurium that has a rhizome, which is a thick, thick stem, and from this thick stem, imagine like the stem almost as thick as like a thin banana, and then you have all these roots that are growing out of it. You're going to do exactly what I said. You're going to remove all the rotted material, but you're going to keep that rhizome, or maybe a carrot is a better analogy. So you're going to keep the rhizome, which is the main stem, and it's going to end up looking just like
Mhm.
a carrot, like a bare carrot. That's what you're going to end up with. However, if you have an aroid like a philodendron that does not have a rhizome, it just has, a stem, and then it has a root system on the bottom, your better bet would be, or a Hoya even, your better bet is, instead of just chopping all the roots off, just take a cutting of the plant higher up. Chop all those old, ugly roots off, because new roots are going to grow from the higher up nodes. Either way, no matter what plant you're dealing with, your goal is to look at the plant that you have and tell yourself, all ugly roots must come off, because they're not returning back from the dead. They're dead. And they're not going to help in the propagation process. And in fact, if they have rot, that means they have a pathogen. So a bacteria or a fungi that causes rot is now infected in the plant root system. So it's very important that we remove all sections that contain this pathogen. We don't want any rotted sections existing. And if the rot has made its way into the stem or the rhizome of your plant, you have to chop off the stem or rhizome as well. If it's an actual mushy brown rot issue, that's a
Mhm.
pathogen or fungi or bacteria. There's numerous types that cause rot. Doesn't matter for you to diagnose what type, you'd have to send it to a laboratory. Not important. What's important is that we chop it off. Does that make sense
It's
so far?
gone. It's gone. That does make sense. I mean, it can be quite brutal, this, can't it? Because you could be left with, what starts out as a really big root ball, and you could be
Mm,
left with no roots or one, sadly, like a not a very great number of roots, which can be really scary. But as you say, there's no
yes.
point in leaving the stuff that's dead and rotting because it's not going to help anybody.
No.
Yeah,
Yeah, and you
it's
might, like you said,
scary.
you might be left with no roots, and that is totally okay, because and that's why this is called propagation renovation, rehabilitation, because if you understand the basic tactics of houseplant propagation, like I explain in my book, The Ultimate Guide to Houseplant Propagation, such as using a prop box and propagating in moist sphagnum moss, or propagating a plant cutting, a stem cutting in fluval stratum and perlite. Once you know how to do those methods, execute those methods, from here, you have a multitude of options. So if you're looking at your philodendron stem at this point and it looks like just a long stick with a bunch of nodes and some leaves on top, you can think to yourself, wow, I could either stick this whole thing in water and let it grow new roots. I mean, that's the easiest. Or I could cut it into individual nodes, like little sticks. So I'll cut along each internode, and then I'll have a bunch of little sticks with a node on each one, and I'll throw it in a propagation box, which is a clear box filled with sphagnum moss and perlite. And I'll lay the nodes on top, 100% humidity, put it in bright light, and they will root. And then you'll end up with 10 philodendrons, 20 philodendrons.
Mhm.
So there's having the tools to be able to propagate, or the knowledge of how to propagate, will give you so many options of what to do at this point. And when it comes to alocasia specifically, you're now looking at, you have a rhizome or even anthurium specifically. Those two types of plants are the most challenging because you can't just throw them in water at this point. The rhizome is very prone to rot. So a lot of times what aroid growers will do is then propagate them in perlite or leca, because these are very airy substrates. So these kind of rhizomes, because they're so sensitive to rot, need very airy, porous substrate. They need tons of air, but they need tons of humidity and like light amount of moisture. They can't be fully submerged and drenched like a sponge. And they'll put it in the substrate and then in 100% humidity, and roots will grow almost like it's suspended in air within this moist substrate. And a lot of times using a semi-hydroponic setup, like a little dish of water on the bottom. So it's a little more technical when you're propagating these types of aroids from here. But other plants you're dealing with, it can be a very, very simple matter of then just sticking the fresh, newly um, hair cutted, newly cut and trimmed plant in a glass of water and propagating it from there is at its
Yeah.
basic.
Absolutely. And for some plants, I think this is a lifestyle. Like, if you've got Tradescantia, for example, really, if you don't do this, unless you've got a very, very specific care regime, your plant is going to start looking miserable. Anyway, lots of house plants just do over periods of time. So this is
Right,
really something, a rhythm you've kind of got to get into to keep your plant looking good, that continuous propagating, plus backups obviously as well. But yeah,
right.
absolutely. It doesn't always have to be like disaster scenario. Although
Yes.
oftentimes, obviously, we all make mistakes and get to that point with plants where things go wrong. And as you say, Hoyas can be just really annoying. I love Hoyas, but
I
they
do.
just are really annoying in doing what you've described, in that they can
Right.
look great for ages, and they get flat mites as well, which, as you say, I must do an episode on flat mites because they are, I
Oof.
think, the sort of the secret pest that really people
A
are not
newer
aware of.
pest. They're
Yeah, that
really a
people aren't really
newer.
treating for or don't know how to deal with. And yeah, there's definitely a lot of undiagnosed flat mite out there. But as you say, it's a great way of learning about your plant. I guess my only other issue with the kind of this issue of renovation propagation is, I wonder if there's another step at the end, which is going back to the beginning and saying, well, why did my fiddle leaf fig end up as two leaves at the top of a 6 foot stem?
Yes.
Right? In that
Yes.
you can go through that process of taking that propagation and growing it again, but it's the same thing's probably going to happen unless you realize. So I guess
Exactly.
the other thing is like a period of reflection might be
Yes.
necessary to work
Journaling
out.
time. But truly, truly, like a period of reflection because you may have fixed the rot, but you have not fixed the environmental conditions that got you there in the first place. So, was your plant too close to a drafty window? Or do you live in wonderful Chicago where it gets from sub 20 degrees to 100 degrees and your plant just can't handle
Mm.
that environment? Is it the right plant for you? All these deep life questions you have to answer. But truly, you can't just repot it and say, here we go. The same problem will happen again. And especially speaking with succulents, which we didn't talk about much because I'm much more of a tropical plant girly, but I do have succulents that I love. And the biggest problem with succulents is that they exfoliate, which means they stretch out towards the light. And most people buy succulents, um, like Echeveria, that are these beautiful, tight looking rosettes. And because they're so beautiful and geometrical and symmetrical. And then over time, they become these long, lanky Dr. Seuss like plants. And this is another extremely useful application for propagation as renovation with these succulents. When you have these long, lanky succulents, you can then pop the leaves off and create from each leaf a brand new succulent. And
Mhm.
that's an amazing way, like, and it's hard for people to do, like, "Well, what do you mean I'm going to literally dismantle my entire succulent?" Yes, you are going to take every single leaf off, and you're gonna end up with a stick, and you are going to then have about 5, 10, 20 echeverias. And, the process of how to do that, it's in my book, you can find it on the internet, it's all over. We won't get into that right now. However, my point is once you grow these beautiful new tiny rosettes, if you put them back in that same window, you'll have
Mhm.
20 long stretched out echeverias.
And what you should be doing is tracking down the beep person who's told you that you can put an echeveria in a low light place, right? I
Yes.
mean, who are these
Uh,
people? "Oh, yes, they do really well in" No, they don't. They really don't. I mean, I suppose it's I also find this with, snake plants, where people are like, "Yeah, they're
mhm.
really good, good low light plants." I'm like, well, yes and no. Like, I mean, I've just got one at the minute, a Sansevieria or now Dracaena laurentii that is, that's been deliberately put next to a TV, not in a south-facing room, but not in enough light, and it's now outside, and I'm like, "Yeah, you've got stretched, and I'm gonna have to sort
Yep.
you out." But I did it in full knowledge, but after being there for 2 years, it's now stretched to hell because
Yep.
it hasn't had enough light. It's like, why do people do this to themselves? But I guess, I mean, I guess it's there's the ultimate struggle to find a low light plant which doesn't really exist. There's not so
Right.
few plants that are going to thrive in those conditions. But yeah, it is. I mean, succulents. I just think that's the biggest crime of all is
I
people
know.
being told they can grow them in their north facing small window and just like especially echeverias, they're the worst because
I
as you say,
know.
they just go off like a firework and it's just
Right.
and
It's a
then as you say, you
scam.
propagate them, but then you've got 20 and then you've got
That
20
stretch
plants
out.
that you don't have enough light for. I mean, please give them away at that point, right? Or do
Or
something.
buy a grow light. Buy a really
Yeah.
strong grow light and don't put that grow light a few feet over the plant. Put it right over that echeveria until maybe you start to see the leaves look like they're a little burnt in color. Then move it up an inch because
Mhm.
it needs that much sun. Like it needs so much sun that you are blasting these succulents. I mean, that's how I grow. I shouldn't say someone listening to me like, that's not how you measure light. You should be measuring it with a ppfd meter. And there's a lot more people that are more scientific out there in terms of there's ways to measure how much light your plant should get with a light meter. But if you want to just experiment with how much light your plants should be getting, um, you could use my very unscientific way, which is put the light very, very close to your plants. And if after 1 week or two, you start to see a little discoloration in the leaves, it's not going to
Mhm.
ignite your plant on fire. It's just going to be like a slight lightening of your leaves. Then I know my plant got enough light, but a little too much. And then I lift it up a little bit. And that's how I grow my succulents. And finally, after a couple of years in Chicago, I got my grow light to the perfect level for my succulents to be compact. And it is so much closer than I thought it had to
Mhm.
be. And I'm talking,
Yeah.
it's one of those Soltech large, it's a large Soltech
Mhm.
pendant. And it is hanging literally like 5 inches
Yeah.
from, I mean, I thought like the
Yeah.
plant stand was gonna ignite on fire, but no, I mean, there's no fire risk,
Yeah.
but it is so bright. So, moral of the story
Yeah.
is you've gotta go back and reflect after you do this propagation and reflect and then experiment of
Mhm.
what's good change your conditions. If you go back and do the same thing that you did the first time, you're going to get rot again.
Yeah, and you're back to square one, and that's no fun. I think, though, a lot of people are just so terrified to begin with this. I think they like it does feel, I guess, for somebody who's new to this, it does feel like opening Pandora's box in that, you get halfway through chopping the roots off, and you think, oh my gosh, what am I doing? Have you got any kind of comforting words of people who've like started this or are just too afraid to get going with this kind of large scale renovation of a plant?
Honestly, well, a few comforting words. And this is not to sell my book. This is to sell anything that would help you. But my book does walk people through all these steps we spoke about in a very step by step manner. So if you could find something like my book or my book, The Ultimate Guide to Houseplant Propagation, or a website that works for you, just to gain the basic understanding of how to propagate a cutting in water or how to use a propagation box. And if you know how to take a cutting and put it in water and feel confident with that and grow roots from a cutting in water, you'll have the confidence to then start acting more like a plant doctor to your plants. Um, and the other thing I was going to say is just experiment. Just I have had so many failures. I have had so many plants that I have killed. I mean, it's ridiculous. I used to. I've gotten better. I've gotten a lot better, but I still kill plenty of plants and not on purpose. But when I started out, I was not one of those people that were born with a green thumb. My parents were, and I wanted to be like them. And they used to laugh at me because I killed every single plant that I own. And only I mean, they really used to laugh at me. It was like the joke because I just like had this love for plants, but I didn't I didn't understand their needs. I didn't understand light needs. It just clicked so late for me. I used to put every plant in such low light conditions, and then I would over nurture them and water them so much, and then they would all rot because I didn't understand how much light when I was younger a plant needed, and that if you gave them more water, they needed more light to photosynthesize, but none of that was clicking. I mean, none of it was. This is like when I was in my 20s, I was obsessed with plants. So if you're there right now in that stage and you're like, gosh, I just can't even keep a plant alive, keep going. It's okay. I mean, that's how you learn. That's the best way to learn. I mean, from all of my mistakes is how I eventually became an author of, I mean, I should be the least qualified author based on how many plants I've killed in my lifetime, but now I'm breeding new species of plants because I've done and I do endless amounts of experiments and trial and error until I get it right. So don't be afraid to try to get it right
Mhm.
because eventually you will get it right.
Yeah, and plants want to grow ultimately. And the other thing I kind of tell myself if I'm sort of feeling precious about plants, like I spend a lot of my time as a houseplant podcaster talking about how amazing plants are. But I also have to say to myself, it's not really that different from a carrot. Like it's not, it's just a
Yeah.
plant. Like it's not, if it all goes wrong, if it all goes, as we say in the, do you say this? Do you say if it goes pear shaped? Do you say that? If something goes pear
No, but
shaped,
I love it.
if
Oh, I got
if it all
all these
goes
new
pear
expressions.
shaped, if it all goes pear shaped,
What's wrong with
then
the shape of a pear?
well, indeed, what is I love a pear, but anyway, that's apparently a bad shape to be. But if it all goes pear shaped, then the compost heap awaits, and it'll all be
Oh.
fine. But
And
yeah,
then you'll end
exactly.
up in the
Like
bin
don't.
water, and you don't want that.
Yeah, they the bin juice gets involved. Oh
The
yeah,
bin
absolutely.
juice.
I think it's I think sometimes we can take ourselves too seriously. I guess the risk is, you buy a very expensive plant and this happens to you. It can feel
I've been
very high
there.
stakes,
Oof.
but you know, that is ultimately being afraid of it is not going to help you succeed, right? You've just got to get
Right.
right in there. If it is an expensive plant, then it's really worth doing your homework and finding out how to try to revive it because otherwise, I mean, is there anything you've brought back from the dead where you've literally thought this is it, there's no way, and you've still managed to revive something from a very poor position?
Yeah, actually, very recently, that's literally just what happened. I have a friend named Lucas, and he's a horticulturist at the Amazon spheres, which is an amazing job. So
Hmm.
I did not want to mess this up for this guy because he asked for um, a piece of my Alocasia punctabornesis, which is this really cool alocasia species. They don't have it at the Amazon spheres. And I said, "Oh, sure, I'll give you a piece of mine." And right before I went to propagate it, like a few months, no, like a month before, the whole plant collapsed because that's what alocasias are a-holes. They like know when you want, they're like, "Oh, you want to do something with me? Wah, I'm going to die." So this plant literally just starts like drooping. This is late Chicago winter too. So probably like a cold draft came in and it was like, I can't, no, no more will to live. So I thought, oh gosh, this is very, very important and very important to me because this is like the conservation of plants. And I want this to be in the Amazon spheres because my plant could die, but I want it to live on in the spheres. So I'm like, okay, I really need to propagate this plant. There were no corms. So at first I thought, okay, I'm going to dig for corms. This will be perfect. I'll find corms in the bottom of the pot and then I'll send this guy, Lucas, a bunch of corms and they'll regrow those at the spheres. Of course, not a single corm. Thank you, plant. Thank you. So it was like a giant plant too. And with these huge, it was on its way out anyway. It was long, long rhizomes. Some of you that grow alocasias might know plants that look like this. I don't know if I have one now. But it was getting at the end of its life anyway. So it just had these long stems with some leaves on top. So I thought, I'm gonna have to propagate this by rhizome. And I thought, okay, easy. I'll just like take it out of the pot. There will be roots on the bottom, and I will chop off the rooted parts and root those for him. And I lifted it out of the lechuza pond, and 99% of the roots were just mush. So that was why it went downhill. But that's what alocasias do. They just like decide to rot one day just because it's fun for them. So I removed all of the rot, like I said, and what was left was one single root and of one of the rhizomes. And so I chopped it up because I thought, you know what, I'm going to try to really improve my chance of success here. And I chopped up the rhizomes were so long. There was a few of them. I chopped them up into little pieces. And I thought, what would be the best and fastest way to propagate this? I said, I'm going to put this in a propagation box, 100% humidity. And I've done this before. I think it's going to work. I let them, and I didn't get into detail on this as we spoke before about the process of rehab. I have a blog article on my website, All the Plant Babies, actually detailing alocasia rhizome propagation, if anyone's curious. But what I did next was I let them harden off for a few hours so that the cuts could kind of dry and seal. to reduce mold. Then I put rooting hormone powder gel on it, Clonix. Clonix has a mild fungicidal effect, but mainly it's rooting hormone. So I'm setting myself up for like maximum success here. There was no rot on it because I removed everything, and I put it on top of moist sphagnum moss in a 100% humidity box. Nothing can go wrong. Everything's great. The roots are going to grow. It's going to go to the Amazon spheres. So he messages me like a few weeks later to check on how it is and if I could send the package. And I opened the box, and it was like the alien takeover. I mean, white. I don't know if it's from the sphagnum moss or because I my hands were sterilized, but white mold, like white fuzzy mold, took over the entire top of the box. I mean, it was just
Wow.
like, what is like I use propagation boxes all the time, but why is everything covered? It was like cotton stuffed in there. And he was
It's
really
like
nice
the
about
opening scene from The Last of Us or something. You're like, "Are you
yes.
waited
I
on
was
and
I was
you
like shutting the box, like this thing can't come out. Like I cannot start the next COVID pandemic
can't
and
send that into the Amazon spheres."
yes,
Oh,
yeah. I
no.
can't send that into the Amazon spheres and kill all their plants. Oh my gosh. So yes, I closed the lid and then I like took a shower and thought about this. And I'm like, okay, what am I going to do? Because underneath this white, I'd never seen that happen. But obviously, in 100% humidity, there were some mold
Mm,
spores that got in, and they spread, which is it was really crazy and had me rethinking. Like, gosh, I have to really make sure that I sterilize. And this is why it's important to keep your hands 100% clean when you propagate. Wash, wash,
mm,
wash, or spray your hands with rubbing alcohol. Because who knows, like maybe I touched another flower that had like some mold or something on it before, and that can happen
mhm,
too. But this doesn't happen often, okay? This never happened to me before. So he was really nice about it. He's like, "This happens all the time." I'm like, "Thank you, Lucas." It's very as a horticulturist, he sees this stuff. So I thought it was all gone, but I never give up. I never give up with plants to a fault. Like at this point, I should have just dumped it, but
mm.
I would not. So I took each one out and I soaked each one in a soak of hydrogen peroxide, 3%, at a ratio of 1 part hydrogen peroxide to 4 parts water. And a lot of people do this when there is presence of mold. It's a little controversial because some people do think that the hydrogen peroxide can harm living tissue, which it can. But when you have actual mold on your plants, um, you'll want to do this even at the risk
Mm.
of harming living tissue because you have to get rid of this mold if it's this bad. And so I soaked it, and the oxygen what happens is in hydrogen peroxide, the oxygen oxidizes and actually gets rid of the mold. Soaked it and then potted up each one individually into a cup of fluval stratum and perlite. And instead of in a prop box, I left each one in a cup and left it out in ambient conditions so that the top would not mold. No more humidity. I said, I'm just going to give this we're just switching gears. We're switching courses here. Like this creature is not going to come back because it's not, my room is 30% humidity. It can't come back. And sure enough, um, I would say, actually, I think all of them, I think every single one of them grew roots and sprouts. And it was like an unbelievable comeback. And the mold tried to come back on a couple of them, like a light film. And then I kept spraying it with the hydrogen peroxide. And there was no damage to the tissue. And now I have like 4 beautiful Punkac Bernices alocasias. And I sent a couple of them to the Amazon spheres.
Brilliant. Well, that is a real success story. It just shows you if you've got the time and the energy to keep going, then
Or the
it's worth it.
craziness. There's part
Oh, you're
crazy in
just
my
so,
head. Yeah.
yeah, bloody minded that you just like, "I'm not giving up on this. No way."
Never giving up,
Uh
ever.
Well, that's an inspirational note to end on. It's been delightful to chat to you, Lindsay, about propagation, and we'll put all the details of your book in the show notes for people to have a look at because it is a really useful guide, and it's got so many good step by steps in there, which are oftentimes people talk about this stuff, but don't actually go into, right, what do you do in what order and what do you need?
Right.
So I highly recommend this book. But it's been a pleasure to chat to you. And thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you for having me. I'm so grateful.